And now that we are done talking about the UFC 309 main event, let's get into the rest of the card, and it starts in the 5-round co-main event that I damn sure didn't see going 25 minutes, but it sure did, and it absolutely delivered. Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira back in the win column, back in the title picture. He gets the decision victory over Michael Chandler, the first fight that Michael Chandler has had in over 2 years. I'm starting off this discussion by talking about just how good "Do Bronx" Charles Oliveira looked in this fight. 35 years old, and this was one of the most complete performances that we had ever seen out of Charles, especially when you consider this went into the championship round, something Charles had not seen during his insane championship run a couple of years ago. And boy, did he look insanely good in all facets of his game. The striking was on point, landing big, very impactful shots to the chin of Michael Chandler, ripping to the body, landing leg kicks. His jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, his grappling on point essentially took Michael Chandler down whenever he wanted to. And once he had Chandler down on the ground, Chandler was not getting back up until the start of the next round. Yes, Chandler had a huge moment in the 5th round where he hurt Oliveira on the feet, and it was not a perfect performance, right, because of that, but this is as close to a shutout that Charles Oliveira has had in recent memory. To do what he did to someone as dangerous as Michael Chandler was very, very impressive. I mean, just go back to in 2021 where we saw them fight for the championship, and Michael Chandler, maybe given 5 more seconds, would have became the lightweight champion with a first-round finish over Charles Oliveira. That is how close it got here. But now Oliveira really has turned the page, and 3 years later beats Michael Chandler for a second time, and this time very, very convincingly. Yes, he of course finished him in that first fight, but there was something about this performance that as a fan, I thoroughly enjoyed. And yes, it went the full 25 minutes, but man, what a fight it was. Did it have some dullness? I mean, I guess maybe a little bit, but these guys were absolutely zonked. They were gassed. So in that 4th round, I think is where it really hit, like, oh, Charles is just kind of get his gas tank a little bit more full to head into that 5th and final round. But all in all, an incredible fight, as we all anticipated. It was the fight of the night. It had one of the most memorable moments of the year. Charles Oliveira is on the back of Michael Chandler. Chandler stands up, jumps in the air, slams him down, then does it a second time, because yes, that did happen in their first fight together. So this time Chandler doubled down, did it twice. What a way to end that fight. What a rivalry, really, that these two have built solely on competitiveness and wanting to be a lightweight champion. And unlike the main event, it seems all but certain what is next here for the winner, Charles Oliveira. He will be front row in January to watch Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan 2, the rematch many, many years in the making. Now Islam Makhachev the champion, Arman Tsarukyan the challenger, both on great win streaks, both have accomplished so much and grown so much since that first bout. It is very, very highly anticipated, a very high-level fight heading into 2025. It hasn't been 100% confirmed, but the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles, California, the new high-tech arena out there, that is where we think we are going to be seeing Islam look to defend his championship once again, this time against his rival, that is Arman Tsarukyan. And Charles Oliveira is pretty much guaranteed, it seems, to get the winner of that for later on in 2025, the lightweight title challenger. And for Michael Chandler, I mean, I couldn't help but feel a little bit bad for the guys the fight went on because of how good Oliveira looked and how he was just putting on a clinic over Chandler up until some of the moments in that 5th round. Pair that with 2 years laid off on the shelf. Obviously, he was in 2 to 3 training camps preparing for Conor McGregor. That is Michael Chandler. Of course, he faced him on The Ultimate Fighter as a coach. It never came to fruition in 2023, and obviously here in 2024, it was slated to happen at UFC 303 in June. It fell through due to a broken toe on the side of Conor McGregor. Chandler decided to not wait any longer, take this fight here against Oliveira, and loses. Now 2-5 in the UFC, but all 7 of his fights have been nothing but pure electricity and pure entertainment for us fight fans. Michael Michael Chandler's run has been very, very memorable and will go down as one of the craziest short-lived runs in UFC history. And I'm not saying he's done. He's clearly going to retire a UFC fighter and get a couple of more fights under his belt. In the post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, he mentioned two names. One, a little bit more fun and just kind of in passing, and the other, well, you know what that's going to be. But let's start with the first one, a BMF fight with Max Blessed Holloway. That would be incredible. Max Holloway has confirmed he will look to permanently make the switch to 155 pounds coming in 2025. I think he wants to target an International Fight Week middle of the year type card to make that true debut and a permanent switch to the division around that time frame. Michael Chandler seems interested in welcoming him for that opportunity and for that silver BMF title. But if he doesn't get that fight, you know who Michael Chandler called out. It's the man he's been calling out for 17 years, Conor McGregor. Will we get that fight? I, for one, just don't think we're ever going to see Conor McGregor fighting, to be quite honest with you. In the post-fight media scrum, Dana White said late 2025 is when he anticipates Conor McGregor to be back. At this point, I don't even really have much interest in Conor McGregor fighting at all. Of course, if he does, I'm going to be tuning in. He's the biggest star the sport has ever seen. He attracts eyeballs. He, at one point, was one of the most elite fighters in the company. I, of course, will be interested in anyone that he fights upon a potential return. And I hope for Michael Chandler's sake, he does get the Conor McGregor fight, because 2 years lost of his career waiting on Conor, it would be an absolutely just retirement-worthy paycheck that he would receive. It would more than likely be a main event spot on a very, very big card with a whole lot of eyeballs attached to it. But let's just see. I think a little time away here for Chandler made him realize he doesn't want that any longer. I think we're going to see Chandler in the first half of 2025, if I had to guess, and that means Conor McGregor will not be next. The more I sit here and think about it, I do believe that the official debut in the weight class for Max Holloway from a permanent perspective will be against Michael Chandler. I think that's what we get next. This is where things do get a little bit interesting. We have to talk about Mr. Bo Nickal as he improved to 7-0, but it wasn't the performance we are used to seeing out of the former three-time national champion out of Penn State University. Bo Nickal, 7 victories, 0 defeats, 6 finishes, 1 decision, and that was here at UFC 309, where he gets the unanimous decision, 30-27 nod over Paul Craig, former perennial top 15 fighter in the light heavyweight division, turned 1-3 middleweight, but albeit it was a victory over Andre Muniz via finish, and then losses to Brendan Allen and Caio Bahaio, 2 top 10 opponents, and now, of course, Mr. Bo Nickal. And during this fight, I was a little bit lost for words. I don't know, it was just a very weird kind of fight for me, so I'm going to try and paint the picture as good as I can here in this recap. We know the credentials that Paul Craig has from a jiu-jitsu and grappling standpoint. Fair? He submitted Magomed Ankalaev, the only man to ever beat him. He submitted the likes of Jamal Hill, a former UFC light heavyweight champion. He's been in there with the who's who and caused many, many problems. Pair that with Bo Nickal being known for his wrestling and his grappling and what he has done to his fellow opponents thus far in his career. It seemed all but certain from minute 1 of this fight, Bo Nickal had little to no interest in taking this fight to the ground, which didn't surprise me, but did surprise me. That's what this whole 15-minute fight was to me, being surprised and being not surprised, and I think that is why I'm so compromised on what to think about this performance and this result. So Bo Nickal chooses not to go to the ground with Paul Craig, one would assume because of the jiu-jitsu skills that he possesses down there on the mat. So instead, Bo Nickal, for 15 minutes, doesn't even shoot one singular takedown. Instead, decides to strike with Paul Craig from minute 1 to minute 15. And yes, he won the fight in all 3 rounds, albeit I think you could make an argument Paul Craig did win the second round in my opinion, but regardless, he did win round 1 and 3 pretty clearly. He landed a couple decent big overhand strikes. So I guess you could say he is obviously making improvements. He trains at American Top Team, one of, if not the best gyms in all of mixed martial arts across many different organizations, may I add. So he's making the proper steps. I mean, let's just look at this here. He made his professional mixed martial arts debut June 3rd of 2022. In 2.5 years later, he's facing someone who's been a top 15 ranked light heavyweight turned middleweight. That is very, very dangerous. That is a very quick rise, and Paul Craig was a huge jump from his previous competition in the UFC, that is Jamie Pickett, Val Woodburn, and Cody Brundage. So I think Bo did do what made the most sense to him, and he did what he had to do to get a victory, but there was just something lacking, because even in the striking that he decided to commit to fully for this fight, he didn't show anything that crazy. I mean, if anything, you could say he looked better against Val Woodburn when he knocked him out in 38 seconds. Bo seemed to just throw big, looping left hooks predominantly, a couple big right hooks. He didn't really establish a jab or anything that really showed big leaps and bounds. But at this stage in his career, at 28, being so fresh and so new to the sport, you would think between fights, especially when he is fighting 2 times a year, he would show just a little bit larger of a jump in skills. And maybe that was my biggest problem here. But all in all, after sleeping on it and being here Sunday morning to recap it, I'm not as disappointed with this performance and this victory for Bo as I was watching it in the moment. The problem here is that, you know, the UFC and Dana even has made it clear they want to move him up methodically, being that he is so new to the sport and has so many skills to continue to improve upon. You put him in there with Paul Craig, who after beating Andre Muniz in his middleweight debut was ranked in the top 15 and then lost to 2 top 10, Caio Bahaio and Brendan Allen, middleweights. Meaning there's nowhere else really to go after Paul Craig at 185 pounds unless it is a ranked opponent. But it seems that Bo isn't ready for that, and the UFC isn't ready for that. That is, I think, where the biggest problem arises. But let's look at the top 15 of the middleweight division. At number 15 is Michel Pereira, who is just on a very big win streak. 7 or 8 fights in a row, if I'm not mistaken. He's coming off of a main event loss where he got pretty much dominated by Anthony Fluffy Hernandez before getting the finish later on in that fight. Fluffy, of course, getting the victory. He sits at number 13. Sandwiched in between them is number 14 ranked Shara Magomedov. He is going to be fighting in February, if I'm not mistaken, at a fight night in Saudi Arabia. So I'm just going to look at number 15, Michel Pereira. Do I think Bo Nickal can beat Michel Pereira, who is an absolute brick of a man at middleweight? I do. And I guess that kind of pairs with the styles make fights. Bo Nickal chose not to grapple with Paul Craig because of how good Paul Craig is on the ground. Well, Michel Pereira, yes, he's good with wrestling and grappling, but he loves to be a wild striker that can really land big, impactful shots. So Bo could just turn back the clock and go to his bread and butter and wrestle Michel Pereira and make it look easy. So maybe he is ready for the top 15, but if it's against someone that is competent at all with takedown defense and defensive grappling, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu, it could be a big, big issue for Bo Nickal moving forward. But for now, again, I don't think there's anyone else on the outside looking in at middleweight for a 4-0 Bo Nickal who's coming off of a victory over Paul Craig. So with that said, Bo Nickal, Michel Pereira, 2025? In the women's flyweight division, we had a bit of a surprise where Viviane Araujo ended the 9-fight win streak of Karine Silva and ended her own losing streak, if I'm not mistaken. No, I guess she was coming off of a loss to Natalia, but before that was a victory. Viviane Araujo had lost 3 of her last 4 heading into this fight, so now has a little bit of momentum at 37 years old. It was a big victory for her, but to be quite honest, I thought it was pretty clearly a 29-28 for Karine Silva. I could be completely wrong. I'm not saying it's a robbery by any means, but I'll just say I had a whole entire tweet typed out on the Verbal Sparring X page that you should go follow, by the way, ready to tweet about Karine's victory, making it a 10-fight win streak, making it 5-0 in the UFC, cracking into the top 10. And then I had to delete the whole entire thing because Viviane did get the decision. let me go look real quick at what the poll was that I posted on social media. So I asked, how did you score the fight? Because I really did feel that Karine had won this. Betting aside, by the way, I had Karine in a parlay. I just thought that she won the fight relatively clearly. It was a very sloppy third round, may I add. These two are both very exhausted, especially Karine Silva. That's been the biggest detriment of her young UFC career thus far, is that the later the fight goes, the less gas that she has in the tank. But 67% of the votes voted for Karine Silva, 33% for Viviane Araujo. So a bit of a weird fight, nothing too crazy in terms of takeaways, but it was a big bounce-back win for the number 9 ranked flyweight that is Viviane Araujo. We'll see what she gets matched up with next in 2025. We've got people ranked ahead of her that are paired to fight. We have a title fight between Valentina Shevchenko and Manon Fiorot. At least I hope that's going to be booked next. Alexa Grasso has a broken leg at the moment. So we'll see. Maybe she gets someone like Jessica Andrade or Caitlin Chookagian. I believe they've even fought before a few years ago. But my hat is off to Viviane Araujo. She did what she had to do. She gets the victory. She gets some momentum back. And last but not least, starting off the main card was Mauricio Ruffy fighting out of the Fighting Nerds, improving to 11-1 with his very first ever decision victory. Actually, the first time that he's ever went to a decision in general. He gets the victory over James Llontop, a unanimous decision where Mauricio looked absolutely incredible in rounds 1, in rounds 2, and in moments of round number 3, but Llontop had the better moments in that third and final round. It looked like Ruffy was getting a little bit gassed in that fight, and to be fair, he was emptying the tank. He was hitting Llontop with some of the most nasty shots I've ever seen that have never put a man down. Llontop never even dropped via knockdown in this fight, so my hat is off to him, especially taking this fight on short notice. But how amazing are the Fighting Nerds right now? How entertaining is this team out of Brazil? Ruffy is now 2-0 in the UFC. He's a 2023 Dana White Contender Series alum. 10 of those 11 victories are by way of knockout. This man is electric for the lightweight division, and he moves like a prime Conor McGregor. A very wide stance, very bouncy, hands relatively low. He's very precise, very technical, and carries insane power. He even landed a no-look left hook that absolutely took Llontop's head into the bleachers, and even still, he didn't go down. What a war that this fight turned into. I'm really excited for the potential of the 28-year-old Ruffy fighting out of Brazil, representing the Fighting Nerds. Him, Caio Bahaio, Gene Silva, Carlos Prates, Bruna Brazil, they are on fire right now. 2025 could be an even bigger year for the Fighting Nerds, who may just be the team of the year for 2024. Now that we're done with the main card, let's jump into the prelims to finish off this recap, and it starts in the bantamweight division where Marcus McGhee and Jonathan Martinez went toe-to-toe for 15 minutes in a very fun back-and-forth striking battle where Marcus McGhee got the better of this fight. He gets the unanimous decision victory. He improves to 4-0 in the UFC, and most importantly, he will go from unranked to top 15 in this 135-pound division come Tuesday morning after this victory over the number 13 ranked Jonathan Martinez, who has now dropped 2 consecutive fights, his last one at UFC 301 where he lost to Jose Aldo returning from retirement. But this didn't come easy for Marcus McGhee. The first decision that he's ever had, by the way. Prior to this, he was 9-1 with 9 finishes, now 10-1, 1 decision to his name against the ultra-tough, ultra-durable Martinez. Martinez in that third round, the leg kicks that he's known for started to pay dividends. Marcus McGhee was essentially fighting on one leg for the latter half of that third and final round, but still throwing big shots and landing very big, devastating shots. McGhee really looked good here. He surprised me a little bit. I thought this line was a little off. I felt that Martinez, even though coming off of the loss to Jose Aldo, still should have been the betting favorite heading into this. He had won 6 fights in a row prior to that Aldo loss, but McGhee proved me wrong, but I'm glad he did. I'm a big fan of him. He's very well spoken. He's very exciting to watch. The finishing prowess, the technical capabilities to last 15 full minutes. I would love to see him get a crack at a main event slot against another top 15 opponent next in this bantamweight division. If we take a look at who's ahead of him, assuming he's going to enter around that number 13 realm, we have guys like Kyler Phillips. We even have Jose Aldo. We have Mario Batista. We have Rob Font. Ooh, Him versus Rob Font would be super fun. Yeah, let's do that, please. Marcus McGhee, Rob Font, 5 rounds? Come on, you know you guys want it. If not, give him a featured bout on a pay-per-view card. That fight would be very, very fun. Jim freaking Miller does it again. In his 45th UFC fight, he gets a first-round submission over Damon Jackson. 38 victories, 18 defeats. 28 of those 38 are by way of stoppage. Fun fact, maybe my favorite fun fact of UFC 309, Jim Miller's last decision victory was at UFC 205 in 2016 against Thiago Alves. Since then, he has won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fights. Since then, all of them are by way of stoppage. To do that at 38, 39, 40, and 41 is absolutely unbelievable. Jim Miller is a legend and a bona fide UFC Hall of Famer when he calls it a career. Most fights in UFC history, most victories in UFC history, tied for second, or not tied, but in the running for second most submissions in UFC history with 13. Jim Miller, man, what more can you say about this guy? Damon Jackson gave him all he could handle. Jim Miller jumped the guillotine. He made Dustin Poirier very, very proud. He made it clear that he wants a hard stop at 50 UFC fights. So that means we get 5 more opportunities to see Jim Miller, meaning he probably calls it a career in 2026. But until then, let's enjoy every single moment we get of the A10 New Jersey legend. Marcin Tybura became the first man to defeat Jhonata Diniz, and he did it by way of doctor stoppage at the end of the second round after getting Diniz down to the ground and absolutely brutalizing him with some elbows that caused disgusting cuts on both eyelashes of Diniz, on the bridge of his nose. He was an absolute bloody mess. There won't be able to be pictures of it here on the channel. Well, I can black and white them maybe. If you didn't see it, they're just too graphic. Marcin Tybura, what is he now? He's number 9, first and foremost, in the heavyweight division. Been a perennial ranked guy for years and years at this point. 39 years old, beating a young up-and-comer, undefeated at that Diniz was. Come on, man. Out of Poland, 26-9, 17 finishes. Look, he's never going to be a champion, in my opinion, in this heavyweight division, but he is a perfect man to halt the momentum of young up-and-comers and still have some fun fights with veterans like Tai Tuivasa, Sergey Spivak, etc. Ramiz Brahimaj kept his 100% finish rate intact, but it wasn't with a submission. No, he's now 11-5, 11 victories, 10 of them by sub, 1 of them by knockout. And it was here at UFC 309 with a brutal knockout over Mickey Gall, 2 minutes and 55 seconds into the very first round of their fight. Ramiz Brahimaj, this is a fun fact too, dating back to February 6, 2018, he had a victory in LFA. Since then, it has been a loss, a win, a loss, a win, a loss, a win, a loss, a win, a loss, a win at UFC 309, meaning in 2025, can he break that spell or will it be a loss? Time will tell, but the welterweight division, hey, Ramiz Brahimaj is going to be in a fun fight regardless of who he fights. 32 years old, in his prime. Maybe this can be the start of a nice special run. And lastly, Oban Elliott remains undefeated in the UFC, 12-2 now, 6 finishes to his name for the Welsh gangster. 26 years old, he's 3-0 in the UFC. He's a 2023 Dana White Contender Series alum. He's a longtime veteran of Cage Warriors, had a ton of hype coming out of Europe when he entered the UFC scene, but this was the big performance he was looking for. He gets the knockout in the 3rd round over Bassil Hafez, the first finish in the UFC for Oban, and his first finish since May 28th of 2022. Now 3-0 in the UFC in the welterweight division. I'm thinking he's maybe just one more win away from a ranked opponent in this weight class. So give me all of your thoughts on UFC 309. What are your biggest takeaways from this card in the comments below? If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week, I recap the most meaningful results from every card. I break down the biggest storylines and what is at stake heading into each card, and give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify or Apple, where podcast episodes are released there every Friday and Monday. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.